And welcome to another exciting adventure on the energy that surrounds us. I'm your host, Michael, and tonight's guest is a guest I am so excited to have on the show. We've been talking a little bit backstage, and I can tell you guys are in for a treat with this guest. And I could lay out her entire bio, but that would take forever, and I think it would be better to come from her because it is just so amazing what she does and everything that she's a part of. So I will turn it over to my amazing guest, the one, the only extraordinaire, Rahjeena Drabarni.
Thank you, Michael. And it's really an honor that you're having me on today. I'm really appreciative. So yeah, I'm Rahjeena, and I'm also known as the EQ Polymath person and the Alchemist. So the things about me are pretty vast, and what the things that I do, that's what a polymath is, somebody who is involved in many different things. So the best thing to do to find out about me more, so we don't take up a lot of time, is to go to my website, and I think Michael is going to put that in the bottom of this, right?
It's in the description. All the links to you are in the description.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm ready when you are.
All right. Okay, so what drew you to look into alternative healing modalities?
Well, since I was a child, I experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse, and that made me, have emotional issues, and it eventually even turned into addiction. And even when I was going through that and going through addiction, I was looking for every way possible on how I could heal myself, because I wasn't offered therapy or anything like that. And so I was always on the hunt to find new things to learn to heal myself. And so that's where it started.
So is there a healing modality that you kind of resonate with, that you've kind of on your journey been like, this is my default go-to?
It started out being hypnotherapy because I did a lot of self-hypnotherapy. But now, later on in my life, I feel more accustomed to Reiki. I feel like Reiki is my thing now. It's a great energy modality, and it really works. And I use it on myself as well.
That's very cool. I know what you mean about Reiki. That is really cool. And so you talk about being a herbalist in your bio. So what drew you to studying the herbs and becoming a herbalist?
Well, that started in childhood, actually. My father loved to plant things, and he had a great area in the backyard where he had all kinds of herbs and vegetables. We had a fig tree, and so first it was about the herbs with food. I was raised in a Sicilian family, even though I was adopted. I was adopted into that family. And my mother used to make a lot of stuff with bay leaves and that kind of stuff. So it started with food. And then as I got into the occult and into folk magic, I started learning more about what the herbs do magically. And then later on, I was taught by a Buddhist monk who was my acupuncturist what the different Asian herbs were and how herbs are used medicinally. And then I took some courses and actually learned much more about how to use herbs medicinally. So that's where it came from.
So I'm kind of curious because I grew up and I keep hearing the adage in the old days, meaning like up to when pharmaceuticals came in, and not meaning a hit at them, I'm just referring to when we had a shift in medicine, that they would always say the cure for whatever ailed you was, I think, like 100 feet around where you were. Do you find that's true, that with all of the herbs and everything, that it really was nature gave you the cure really close by?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can heal, but I'm one of these people that I believe in addition. So if you've got something really wrong with you, physically, I never tell anybody to just use herbs. Go do what the doctor asks and what the doctor tells you to do, but you can supplement that with herbal medications. That's what I suggest. Some people are, like it's poisonous to what the doctors give you. And that can be, but also science and doctors, they really have made some medicines that do help and that do work. Some people don't believe that, but I do.
No, that's true. And and I think what's amazing as being like with being a herbalist is what herbs work for you may not work for the next person, because we're all unique. And so I
And it's
think that,
not it's not an immediate thing either with herbs. That's the thing. Herbs build up in your body as you take them. So it could take like a month before you have any effects of what you're using for whatever you're using it for. So that's another problem with it. It's a build up thing. It's a natural thing.
oh, I never knew it took a month. So I'm
Some
glad
of
to
them
know that.
can. Yeah, some of them can.
Okay. And I'm kind of wanting to shift gears here for a second, and I'm curious around, do you find sound therapy helps the body in your client's body with massage therapy and acupuncture sessions? And if so, what can you share as a positive effect of using sound therapy?
Okay, well, sound therapy is good by itself, and healing by itself. And I use sound therapy. When I do sound therapy, I'm using Tibetan bowls. And these are like very ancient, antique bowls, from Tibet. And I have them all, in notes that correspond with each chakra. Okay. And so using it by itself is very healing. Of course, if you're having a massage therapy or you're having an acupuncture session, playing healing music in the background is only going to help you. And sound therapy has a lot to do with various hertz. So like 528 hertz is a very healing hertz, and then there's another one that's for your heart, and so on and so on. So what you would do or what I would do is if I had a client like that, and I always, have a consultation first, I would ask them, what they would want to work on and then correspond with music to the session. So it would give them an extra healing.
Very cool. And I'm curious from my own personal experience, like my mom plays this quantum healing device that generates a tone, and for her she's getting benefits. For me, if I listen too long, I start getting headaches from it. Is it just because my body doesn't accept the tone, or is it my body's trying to work on something and that's why I'm not resonating with the tone?
You either have a block somewhere that needs to be worked out, healed, or like you said, you are, it's not the right tone for you. It's not what you need. So what's working for her might not be what you need. You get
Okay.
it? You
I
might need
do.
something different
Yeah.
for your own things.
Right. And the only reason I was questioning it is because of the word quantum put in front of it, because everybody
Right.
thinks quantum means for everyone.
Right. I mean, like if you had pain in your body, you would want to have 174 hertz, 174. That would help you with pain in your body. Okay, and
Okay.
you can find these things on YouTube. You know, you just punch in 174 hertz and play it all night. They have some that go for 9 hours, 11 hours. You can play it all night.
That's true. That is something new that I've found, is having YouTube channels where they have specific hertz that is music designed just for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and on that note, do you find certain chakras more out of balance in your clients and everyday life than others? And is there any insight into it being environmental, societal, or something else that causes all the chakras to go out at like the same time, so to speak?
Okay. So to answer your first question, yes, some people have different imbalances in their body, and some are more closed off in their upper chakras, and some are more closed off in their lower chakras. Usually, I see that people that have had sexual abuse or something along that line, or they're in survival, they're like really in survival, and or they feel like their own personal power is kind of zapped, you know, they will have imbalances and blockages in their lower chakras. And, the upper chakras would be like if somebody is not following their intuition, if somebody is not speaking their truth, or they're, holding things back that they want to say, then their throat chakra will be affected and blocked. Or if they're closing their heart off because they've had, some emotional things that have happened that has made them put a wall up, that can do the same thing. But there's more than just 7 chakras in the body. There's actually 114.
Right. And I'm curious too with your, when if you have like say 4 clients that you're going to be doing chakra work on,
Mhm.
do you find the universe is like, hey, Regina, you need to work on this chakra? So all 4 of those clients will have the same chakra issue that you're needing to work on. Then you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those days.
No, everybody has something different. I've never found the same chakras blocked all the time in the same client, in different clients in the same day. I mean, it's usually always something different. When I do work on people's chakras with energy work, I tend to start seeing the colors. I start seeing the blockages like black spots, and I will literally sometimes start hearing a voice that's telling me why it's blocked and what they need to work on. So after every session, I usually have something that I need to tell them, that's been channeled. So I don't know where that comes from, but I found that happening when I started doing Reiki.
That's really cool. And the reason I asked that question is because a lot of like Reiki healers and a lot of energy workers will say, I get something out of the work that I do on people, and the universe lets me know where, and it helps me by, I'll see patterns. And so I was just curious if that happened in your line of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So, is there any benefits that you suggest to clients to choosing acupuncture over other healing modalities to help balance and heal the body and help with their aura?
Acupuncture is more about healing the body. Um, the way acupuncture really works is two different ways. They either put the needles in along the lines, the meridian lines, which are energy lines in the body, or they literally put them where the pain is. And the way it works is that it's a little injury, it's a micro injury that causes the blood and other healing things in your body to rush to that site and give it energy. And this energy is what creates the healing when you get the acupuncture. So there's other modalities that are way better for energy healing. And I think that acupuncture is awesome for the body healing. And I swear by it. I swear by it. I love it. So.
And when I would have acupuncture done, I always found it interesting. Like, they would go to put it in the wrist and they would say, "This is going to hurt."
Oh yeah.
And I would have it put in the wrist and I'd be like, "Are you going to put the needle in?" And they would be like, "It's already in." And I'm like, "Oh." And I would want to move my arm and they're like, "Don't move your arm," because I guess I could turn the arm over by mistake and drive them in. But
Right.
now when it came to the ankle though, that my leg would jump. I would feel the ankle move. Is there a reason why certain spots are more sensitive than others?
The sensitive spots, well, first of all, you do have parts on your body which are more sensitive naturally. And the parts that are non-fleshy or closer to bones and ligaments and nerve endings are going to hurt a little bit more in some cases, but not all cases. And then usually when the needle is put in, whoever your acupuncturist is usually twists it a little bit, and some of them even put electrodes on the needles, okay, depending on what you need, how much you need, how much work you need. So yeah, there's a difference. There is a difference, and it really depends on the person. It depends. I also think that spots where the healing is needed the most, whether that's on a meridian, which is, because you have all kinds of points in the ear and points on the feet that relate to actual pieces in your body, like heart, lung, kidney, you know. So it depends. I mean, it could be like they would hit something in a meridian where your heart that is connected to your heart, and if you have heart issues, it might make your heart jump, like fibrillate, you know. So yeah, yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. And I do remember, like, the ear, it would be interesting because it would be like running the edge of the ear. And because I have thick hair, I'd often run my hand through my head and I'd find one or two still in there. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you can't get them all out because they are hard to see. They're very tiny.
yeah. But that's really negligence. I mean, they should always, whoever's giving you the acupuncture should always count how many needles they put in you and make sure that they take that amount of number out at the end. So yeah, you shouldn't be leaving an appointment having needles in you still. That's not
Well, like I
cool.
said, having really thick hair, they disappear in there, and I only found it because I was really like running the scalp and not brushing the top of the hair.
Right, right. Yeah.
So do you feel the alternative healing modalities are going to become more popular as we're shifting into the new energies and the Schumann is changing and everything?
I think that's been happening for a while now. I think it started in like the 60s and 70s, actually, especially the 70s, where people started being more attracted to alternative healing. You know, I think that a lot of people are still looking for that because they're getting very disillusioned by the pharmaceutical companies and doctors pushing pharmaceuticals. So yeah, I see a big uptick in people wanting to try alternative healing methods. As time goes on, I think it'll become more. Yeah,
And I mean, acupuncture was the first, I think, alternative to be accepted, and
medicine.
Reiki has now been, I heard, accepted into hospitals as valid treatments. What do you feel like will be the next alternative? Like, the hospitals are going to be like, oh, we're seeing a lot of benefits from this, so we want to try this as well.
Well, I think they're already doing it, but I would think that it would be hypnotherapy because I've heard of a lot of dentists having a hypnotherapy license as well as their dentistry, and they've used it on their clients uh, so that they don't have to have a bunch of opioids or gas or I've heard of people actually being able to go through minor surgeries um, under hypnosis. So I'm not sure what would be classified as medicinally sound next, um, but that's another one. The hypnotherapy is another one.
That's interesting because I've never would have thought about dentistry and hypnotherapy together. Interesting. I guess
Yeah.
that makes sense because people, I think it's the sound of the drill freaks people out more than the actual activity. So I guess if you were in hypnosis, you could not hear the drill.
Well, there's also a lot of people who have, CPTSD, complex post traumatic stress disorder from going to a dentist. They've got trauma from dentistry, you know, so they are resistant to go back to the dentist. And, you know, I believe that that helps it if they were to have hypnotherapy.
That's true, and I didn't think about that, but yeah, I feel like that even helps the dentist.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does.
And so we kind of touched on this before, but I just wanted to ask it in a different way, is what alternative healing modality do you resonate with, and why do you feel it is so?
It would have to be Reiki. It would have to be Reiki. And I feel that Reiki is like good for everything. It's good for emotional healing and it's good for physical healing. I mean, I've used it on people that were going through breakups, and they're having a lot of emotional pain. And I've used it on somebody that was in the last stages of cancer. And with her, she was on so many medications that it was making her ill, and she couldn't sleep. She could not get a good night's sleep because she was in so much pain because the cancer had spread to her bones. So interestingly, every night when I would do the Reiki on her, she would sleep through the night and not even wake up to take her medication. It literally relaxed her that much. And this is distant Reiki. I wasn't even with her in the same room. So Reiki is pretty powerful. Pretty
It is.
powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's amazing how, I don't know if you would call it the placebo effect, or because it's the fact that someone believes it's happening and you are believing it's going through you, that makes the remote Reiki work as much as close. Or, if it's just the body knows the energy and accepts it and knows what to do with it.
Reiki is really interesting because the energy does not come from me or the Reiki practitioner. It comes from the universe. Okay. So everything vibrates with energy. Everything. We do, rocks do, herbs do. I mean, everything, plants. And so their energy is vibrating around us all the time. And with Reiki, we are drawing it through us with a symbol. Okay. When you go through the training, you get the activation. Okay. But we use symbols. And there is a symbol, a special symbol that is just for distant Reiki. Okay. And what I do is I connect with the person through their photo, through their energy, and through their name, because every name has a special vibration in the universe as well. So that is the connection. But, whenever I do distant Reiki, I always do the special symbol that goes with it. So
Yeah,
it opens the portal. It opens the portal of energy, if that makes sense.
it does.
Yeah.
And so, a thing that's rising up and people are taking new looks at right now, and there's a little bit of positive and negative viewpoints about it, is shadow work. And so, do you feel shadow work is something you find beneficial when you're doing your healing sessions?
Shadow work is beneficial for everybody to do. But I don't necessarily do that with my sessions. Shadow work is something that was created by Carl Jung. And it's almost like it's like what they say, the darkest night of the soul. Something that your shadows are things inside of you that you're not aware of, but they're there. Okay. And working through them is a real difficult emotional journey. And that's not anything that could be done in a single session, or, I wouldn't bring that out of somebody if I'm, for instance, working with them, with Reiki, or giving them a reading, a tarot reading or something. It's not something, I mean, even though I do some uh, counseling or some life coaching during or after my sessions, or during my tarot readings. Shadow work isn't something that we get into. I do, however, have packages where I will guide. It's like a whole thing, it's a whole package of weekly sessions that go over months that I will guide a client through it, through their shadow work. But it's not something that's just, thrown into another session of something else. No.
Right. I was more thinking of it as like if you're saying somebody has a low back issue and you're like, oh, this is a past life and, we can heal it that way. That shadow work may come up in that past life to look at. And so that's where I was seeing, I wasn't meaning like, okay, what is your issue now? That's where I was.
Usually I do my past life work with hypnotherapy.
Okay.
So when that happens, yes, I will definitely see things, and you will see things, and you will, under hypnosis, you will tell me the things you're experiencing, and we deal with them in the session of hypnotherapy. Yeah.
Okay. And so you deal with something called emotional intelligence. Can you explain and describe what emotional intelligence is to you and how we can recognize it?
Yes. So emotional intelligence is when you can, well, first of all, you know who you are, okay? And you are able to decipher what you're feeling in real time. So if you got pissed off at somebody, some people act passive aggressive or they act in certain ways and they don't realize that they're just acting out. They're just responding to a situation. Instead of looking within and saying, naming that feeling, I'm angry, this hurt me and that's why I'm angry. Going back to the root. Now, when you are emotionally intelligent, you're able to do that immediately. You're able to go there and know what you're feeling. And emotional intelligence is also understanding other people's feelings, having empathy, being able to communicate. These are all things that come with emotional intelligence, not being reactive. Because some people are very reactive, emotionally reactive, being emotionally unregulated. That is the antithesis of being emotionally intelligent. So, yeah, I hope that answered it.
It did, and it brought up an interesting thing for me is I have a tendency of always having my emotions in check, but then there are times where something that I have not been wanting to look at, like the proverbial bottle, overflows and bursts out. And so then it comes out what I call sideways in another way. And so the fact that I see that it's coming out sideways, is that the emotional intelligence and not the fact that I'm letting it out and giving it voice?
Giving your feelings a voice is a good step in the right direction. Okay. Um, being able to name what you're feeling instead of getting emotional about it, instead of letting your emotions take over, is what emotional intelligence is all about. So if you're saying that it's going sideways, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
So let's say something has me sad, but I don't
Okay.
want to deal with the sadness at this moment. And then somebody does something and it upsets me. Well, the grief is so suppressed that it's like the anger just broke the bottle and the sadness is coming out, and but it's coming out like in a lashing way, and so that's where I mean it's sideways because the person didn't deserve to be
No.
lashed at.
And that is an example of somebody who needs to work on their emotional intelligence. Because what you would do in that situation is somebody's irritating you when you're grieving or you're sad, and I would be the kind of person who would say, you know, that really hurts. I'm really in a bad way right now. You either can explain or you don't have to explain, because you could say I'm grieving because of, but sometimes over explanation or just telling somebody that you're not close to that, you don't have to, unless it's somebody you're close to, you can just tell them your boundary. I'm grieving right now. I'm sad. I feel hurt. And the way you're talking to me is unacceptable. And I really don't want to engage, and walk away.
Okay, yeah, that sounds easy enough. And putting it into practice may not be so easy, but
It takes practice, but here's the good thing. Anyone can learn emotional intelligence. Even people with personality disorders can learn emotional intelligence if they wanted to, if they wanted to study it, because it is studyable. It is something you can study and learn. So
that's true. And in your introduction, you talked about alchemy. And so, do you come across clients or people who use alchemy and don't realize that they're an alchemist?
alchemy is two different things. So historically, alchemy had to do with metals and changing metals. But later on, I think it was, it's the 20th century with Carl Jung. He came up with the philosophy and the idea that alchemy was connected to a person psychologically, and went through, I think it was four different levels, four different colors and four different levels, that you would go through, starting with, I think it was blackening, which is like a whole disruption of who you are. It's like your dark night of the soul. And then it would go to whitening, which would be where you start getting a sense of healing and what you need to do. Then it would go to, I think, yellowing, and then redding or something like that. But the fact of it is, I have not really seen too many clients that are doing it without knowing it. There's a lot of people get stuck, okay, in the process. So they might have the blackening, there's also 7 layers, that are also alchemy, but they would get stuck, like they're going through the dark night of the soul, and maybe they start getting some epiphanies and they want to start healing, and that's usually when they come to see me, at that point. So can I bring them through the steps of alchemy? Sure I can, if they're interested in that. Yeah.
So I'm curious as to your thoughts around. I hear a lot of people nowadays saying like alchemy is just transformation. It's and so is that would you agree with that sentence or would you be like it's
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely, it's transformation. Yes.
Okay, and so here's an interesting question that I thought about for potentially anyone who's watching this show, and that is how can you help someone see the signs that they're in a relationship with a narcissistic partner. Any advice on how to safely leave those types of relationships?
Yes. Okay. The main thing you want to look at to know that you are in a relationship with a narcissist is behavioral patterns. Everybody has bad days. Everybody can be negative or uh, reactive depending on what kind of, what they're going through. Not everybody is emotionally intelligent, but that doesn't mean that somebody's a narcissist, okay? Just because they react toxically at different intervals, depending on what's going on in their life. Behavioral patterns are a different monster, okay? If somebody is showing the same type of behavioral patterns over a period of time, they're usually somewhere on the spectrum of narcissism. Yeah. And what I have done with my clients who were in very perilous situations with a narcissist, you have to plan, and you have to do it without telling them, because some narcissists go into sociopathy. And when that happens, these are high on the spectrum narcissists. Not all narcissists are sociopaths, but all sociopaths are narcissists. Okay. So think of Scott Peterson. Okay. What he did to his wife and unborn child. He was a narcissist sociopath, and so you don't know when you're with somebody what they're capable of if they're showing these behavioral patterns. So the smartest thing to do is to save money any way that you can and make a plan. Make a plan to get out, and don't let them know, because if you do, your life could be on the line.
And just for clarification, because when I think of narcissist, I think of Narcissus of ancient Greece, who was all about himself. And so, how do you view what a narcissist is?
That's a loaded question because there are very variables in narcissism, in people that are narcissistic. Um, Narcissism is on a spectrum, okay? And at the lower end of the spectrum, everybody can pretty much have those kind of a little narcissism with their ego here and there. And it's kind of necessary, because if you don't have any ego, then people can walk all over you and treat you like a doormat and abuse you, and you have no boundaries. And, that's not good either. So as you move up on the spectrum, more narcissistic tendencies come out. But to answer your question of the variables of narcissists, there's somatic narcissists who are very sexual and into their bodies. There are vulnerable narcissists who, usually are very self-depreciating, and they're kind of like quiet people, or they act like they are. There's covert narcissists. They could be a little bit more talkative than the vulnerable narcissist, but they hide. They are very good at hiding who they are. Okay. There's Machiavellian narcissists, which are really dangerous narcissists. There's malignant narcissists who are really, really toxic. They're like at the high end of the spectrum. And they try to destroy people. And it's usually out of envy and jealousy. Unfortunately, they'll do that.
Okay, and one last question about the narcissist is Linda Judd is asking, do you think it's true that narcissists have no empathy?
I do. But then again, Linda, thanks for your question. There is a spectrum, like I said. And, I would say absolutely the narcissists at the higher end of the spectrum do not have empathy. I've seen mid-level narcissists that actually can start becoming self-aware with a lot of, they either have to have like a narcissistic break, uh, where they've lost their job or they've lost their, somebody who loved them, their relationships or their children. Something very heavy has to happen to them, and they might start becoming self-aware, that they're doing these bad things. But up higher on the spectrum, they are not self-aware. They think everyone else is, to blame for whatever goes on in their life, and they don't have empathy. They do not.
Thank you. And, you know, we talk about healing our traumas and everything as an adult, but when it comes to like childhood traumas, do you recommend to clients facing childhood traumas using a specific healing modality, or do you use a shamanistic approach?
That actually depends on the client. But my first mode of advice for somebody, I mean, because that's where shadow work starts happening too. These are things that are stuck in the childhood, and it's the same for addicts and people who are addicted. There's usually a trauma, something that has emotionally traumatized somebody as a child, and it can be one event or it can be several events that just don't stop, that even move into adulthood. But what will happen is, I would say therapy. Start with therapy. I think that the healing modalities, the alternative healing modalities help with this, with your energy, and getting that cleared up. But just helping with your energy is not going to get to the root of the problems that were created in childhood, the emotional problems. Those have to be worked out in therapy. And the best route is EMDR. The best route is EMDR. Talk therapy, if you have somebody that is trauma informed. And I do help people with narcissistic relationships and, going through their trauma. I am trauma informed, and I do help people in that capacity as well.
Okay, thank you. And what do you view addictions truly are, and do you think one can ever truly overcome and heal completely from an addiction?
Addictions are started in childhood. Like I was saying, something, some kind of trauma happened that was so hard to accept, so hard to get over, that feeling the pain of that trauma would feel like you're being annihilated, like you're going to die if you feel that. So, any type of addiction is something that is used by the addict to stuff their feelings down, to numb them. And I don't care if it's sexual addiction, if it's gambling addiction, if it's alcohol, if it's drugs. Any type of addiction is used to keep yourself focused on the addiction and not on what's really causing it inside. Do I feel like somebody can ever really heal from addiction? Yes, I do. If you get to the root, I've heard a lot of people, and some were my clients that I help with addiction, tell me that AA doesn't work. And the reason AA doesn't work is because you go there every week or several times a week, and you hear a bunch of people talking about how their addiction ruined their life. They tell their story, okay? And they you know, pray to God or whatever, and it's not getting to the root of the problem. It's like a band-aid that they're wearing. And, soon enough they go back to their addiction, They're what you call a dry drunk or a dry, drug addict. So it's getting to the root of the problem. And I've definitely seen some of my clients uh, really having great success. I give them homework every week to do. I teach them about changing the patterns in their life and adding things that are good self-care for them. Um, it's an adjustment going through that, but it works. It works. Going back to their childhood, some people don't even think they had any trauma in their childhood. They're like, so they pushed it down so low that they can't even acknowledge it. Oh, my family was great. There was never any problems. And sure enough, we get to it. Every time we get to it and it comes out. So.
And I agree with you. I don't like when I hear places where they say, yes, we can help you with your addiction and just know this is going to be with you forever. I'm like, I just, to me, it just, when I hear that, it's like I want to get up and walk away. I'm like, nope, I cannot
Exactly.
buy into that.
Exactly. I don't buy into it. I never bought into it. I was an addict once for 11 years when I was much younger, from the age of like 16 to, I don't know, 27, around there. And I was able to kick my addiction using what I now use for my clients. So it works. It works.
And I think it's important to have that hope because
It is.
when you tell people you're always going to have it, it's like in my mind, I'm like, then what's the point?
Exactly. Exactly. Nobody could tell you that you're never going to heal. If you get to the root of the problem, if you get to the root of what caused the addiction, you can heal it. You can heal it if you're willing to go there and look at it. I'm still healing one of my things because what happens is we transfer addictions. Okay, sometimes we go from drugs to maybe alcohol, or drugs to shopping, or drugs to overeating, or, alcohol to overeating, whatever. And, I've done that too. I stopped using the drugs, but there was a time I was, shopping and spending a lot of money. And, then there was another time that I was overeating and I got way too big. And, so I'm still working on the food thing that I acquired as a child from my mother's abuse. When you're neglected and you're emotionally neglected and you're abused on top of it, and they give you sodas and cookies and chips, and you can have however much you want, and they're actually trying to make you unhealthy and fat because they're jealous of you as a child because they're a malignant narcissist. Then you take that with you as you grow, as you get older. And then if you ever feel like you're empty inside, what do? You start filling yourself with food. So going back to that and working through that and those feelings of being neglected and rejected, is something that I'm still going through right now. Healing is it's a never ending story. It's something that we do our entire lives, if we're working on ourselves. If you're somebody that chooses to work on yourself because you want to be the best version of you, then healing never ends. You're always trying to make yourself a better human being, you know?
Right. And I like how you mentioned shopping because a lot of people who shop a lot may sit there and say, oh, I'm not hurting anybody, it's not hurting me. And, it's not really an addiction where it's a positive. I mean, you're not like destroying your body or an inside organ, but it is still an addiction. And I think it's important to notice, there are positive ones and negative ones, and positive ones can have a negative effect just as much as the negative ones can. And so, thank you for
Yeah.
mentioning that one.
Yes. You're welcome.
And the next question I have for you is, this has to do with your youth, and that is, what impact on your life do you feel being raised with occult knowledge of the occult history have on you, and do you think it shaped what you work in the work that you do now?
I started out in life with psychic experiences, and those psychic experiences are what led me into the occult. It led me to have many teachers and mentors that helped me to learn the occult through them learning about my psychic abilities. So, do I think it helped me for what I'm doing now? In some ways, yes, because when I started my business in the 1980s, I was focused more on the witchcraft things that I do. So, like spell work and tarot reading and palm reading and tea leaf reading and, that kind of stuff is what I was offering, workshops on different metaphysical and witchcraft things, occult things, and, classes and that kind of thing. That's where it started in the 1980s. So my business started with that. So yeah, it did help me. Yeah.
And do you think it had an impact on you?
Yeah, I really do. I think the impact was that it was something that helped me to make it through all the trauma I've experienced in my life. Um, I really think that my magical side and my musical side helped me go through all the trauma. So that's a pretty big thing. I think if I didn't have that in my life, I'm not sure that I would have made it through. So that's a big impact.
Okay, we're actually getting to the hour. Do you have time to go further?
I
And
do. Yeah.
okay, okay. So my next question is one I like to ask people who, when they have gifts, is, what was your first psychic experience like, and what was the impact on you?
My first psychic experience happened when I was 3 years old. And I can remember sitting on the floor playing with my toys. And when I go back to this story, it's like I'm right there again. I could see my mother washing dishes in the kitchen from where I was sitting. And I was playing with little people, little wooden people. And it was like I saw a movie screen come down in front of my face. Like when you have a projector and the screen, it was like one of those screens coming down in front of my face, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I saw my father, and I saw a couple of my uncles, and they were in a field. And I saw my father holding a red can, and he took out a pocket knife and he punched holes in the red can, the top of it. He took the top off, and then he had a stick. He got put his knife away, got a stick, and he lifted up a snake and he put it in the red can, and he put the top back on that he had punched the holes in. And I got really excited, and I told my mom, Daddy's got a snake. Daddy's got a snake. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's not even here, play, just play. And later when he came home that evening, he came in the house with a red Folgers can and a snake in it. And at that point, my mother started telling everybody in the family, she had this thing happen, and he came home with a snake and a red can, and yeah. So that's where my psychic experiences started.
Okay, and Linda is asking, did Rahjeena have support in her childhood for her psychic abilities?
I did, luckily. I had support. My mother was and wasn't supportive in some ways, my adopted mother. In some ways, it was like every time I had something happen with me, she would have to say that she had something happen with her. I mean, she was very jealous of me. So, but she did support me in ways like she bought me. I don't know where this came from. I think she was trying to make me possessed or something. But right when The Exorcist came out, the movie The Exorcist, she goes and buys me a Ouija board. So,
Oh boy.
yeah. So, and then I had my grandma on my dad's side who came from Palermo, Sicily. And in Palermo, she was I guess she was whatever kind of witch in Sicily, or a wise woman or whatever. People used to go to her, for readings and healings and these kind of things. And she used a lot of olive oil. And, when she got wind of what kind of things I was experiencing, she was like, I'm going to teach her. I'm going to teach her. So she was the supportive one.
I'm glad you had that because a lot of people didn't. And so I think that has a major influence on where we go in our future.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what is your most memorable and impactful experience with the dead? How did it change your perspective, if it did, on life?
I've had many experiences with the dead. Um, and the most recent one was with the client I told you about that had cancer. But I'm going to go to the first one that I had because that was the most impactful, obviously. I was 7 and I was in bed, and I woke up out of my sleep, and I saw my uncle Frank, at the end of the bed. And he looked just like we do, solid, and it was him. And he started talking to me, and he asked me if I would tell his wife, my Aunt Mamie, and his son, Frank Jr., that he loved them. And I said, "You're silly, Uncle Frank. You could tell them yourself. And he said, "Just do me a favor and be a good girl and tell them that for me." And I said, okay, you know, and yeah, bye-bye. And so after that, he walked out, he left after I promised him I'd tell them that. The next day, I got up, I'm eating my cereal, and I told my mom, why was Uncle Frank in my room last night when I was sleeping? And she said, "Uncle Frank wasn't here." And I said, "Yes, he was. He was here. He came in my room. I described what he was wearing. I told her what he said to me, and she just poo-pooed me like, you have such an imagination. What's wrong with you?" Kind of thing, right? And sure enough, later that day, I was playing in the hallway, and the phone rang, and my mom picked it up, and I heard her crying. And I went to the doorway and I peeked in, and she was crying. And she's all, oh no, oh my God, and blah, 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 blah. Well, what I found out was that the night before, my uncle was doing what he always did every night. He was sitting in his easy chair watching the news, and he would fall asleep in his chair watching the news. Then my aunt would come out and wake him up and say, come on, come to bed, right? When she went to go wake him up, he was dead. He had transitioned. Wow. And they found out later with an autopsy that his heart literally exploded. He had an aneurysm or something like that in his aorta, and everything just exploded. And that's how he died. So that one was really, and then, like I said, my mother had to say something afterwards, like a week later, she claimed that he came to her in a dream and he was holding a scroll, and he had all this stuff written on the scroll that he was pointing at and wanted her to tell Aunt Mamie, so she had to say something about herself too, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing that you had that and how the experience unfolded and everything.
I was a strange child, I'll tell you. I guess I'm a strange adult too. So
strange is cool, though.
Thank you. It is what it is.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for those who wish to study occult knowledge and the ways to protect oneself while researching the occult?
First, I'd say you don't need to protect yourself if you're just researching. If you're just researching and reading and studying, there's really nothing that you have to do to protect yourself. You're just gaining knowledge. It's when you start to practice, if you decide to go from studying to practicing, then you have to know some protection. And again, there's so many various ways to do that, because there's folk magic, and there's many paths of folk magic, and then there's ceremonial magic, and there's many paths of that. And each path has different things, and some have multiple things to protect yourself with. So.
Okay, cool.
I hope that answered it.
It did. And
good.
So what goals do you have for yourself going into the future?
That's a good one. That's a good question. I would really just like to be able to help as many people as I can to heal and to grow. I want to continue writing. I want to continue being published. That's a big thing in my life. But all of that, even the things I write, I hope that it helps. If it even helps one person, then I feel like I've done my due diligence. I've done what I need to do, So going forward with my life, that's what I want to do. I want to just, help as many people as I can to heal and to get safe if they're in a bad relationship. Yeah.
Very cool. And so do you think studying the occult history has made you more psychically aware and strengthened your connection with the dead? Or is it something that you were born with?
Both. I was definitely born with this. I was born with a call over me. So that's where you're born with the like a, I don't know what to say. It's like the covering. It covers you. It's like a sack. You're born in the sack when you're born. And I found that out because I met my birth family. Okay, I did get to meet them and know them. So, and my Aunt Lorraine was there when I was born, so that's something they say, that when you're born with that, you're born with certain psychic gifts or psychic abilities. And so I do think that I was born with that. But I also think that being, a practicing occultist, and, I do think that that has made things more energetically strong. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
No, that's cool, and that's helpful actually, because there are things that I was born with, but I never know how to describe it. It's like I always say, I don't know, I was born that way.
Okay. Yeah. So can you give me an example of something?
Like energy, like I could tap into the astral plane ever since I can remember, and travel around, and I could heal. Like I even have a memory of when I was in elementary school. A student, I don't even remember their name, was complaining of a headache, and I just put two fingers on their temples like this, and then took them away, and they were like, "My headache's gone," and
Oh,
didn't know what I did, and don't know why I did what I did, but it's just like I would describe it as, I just was born that way. I just knew from birth because nobody ever taught me. I hadn't studied anything at that point yet.
I believe that that happens because, I believe in reincarnation. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And we bring things, sometimes we're allowed to bring things from our past lives. Um, and I believe that you brought some things with you. You brought some abilities with you, because just knowing automatically to put your fingers on your classmate's head and to remove his headache, that came natural to you. That's something that you knew from another life. I bet you. I bet you. Yeah, that's what I feel.
That makes sense. Okay, and so we kind of talked about this, but I'm just in a new way of looking at it is, do you feel studying occult and the other paths helped strengthen your abilities, or did it make you question your abilities more?
It strengthened them for sure. You know, um, it strengthened them. Things have happened in my life that magically and that aren't explainable. Miracles and stuff like that have happened in my life, and they aren't explainable. But I really believe that these things have happened because of what I work with and what I do. Yeah.
And I'm wondering too is with everything that you're involved in and working with clients and working on yourself, what advice do you have to everyone about how do you find balance in your life with everything you do and everything that you're tapped into?
Well, I have a practice. I have to keep myself balanced. So I have a daily practice. This involves visiting my altars and doing stuff at my altars. This involves meditation. This can involve, depending on if I'm in pain that day, self Reiki. It involves being grateful every day. I literally wake up every morning and say something um, to my spirit team and to those spirits that are with me every day. And, how I'm grateful for this or that. Being in a state of gratitude brings joy to your life, you know. Even the small things like, hey, I got up out of bed and I could walk to the bathroom today. Um, Even something like that. I can go make a cup of coffee. There's people that don't have coffee, so being being grateful. And then, of course, you want to move your body too. It's not only about energy and about emotional things like being grateful. It's about moving your body too. You have to have a balance of, mind, body, and spirit. So I try to do that every day. And that's what I do with my early time, and then when I get later in the day, usually afternoon is when I start working with clients, or I start writing, or I start studying, you know. So I have my time set every day to take care of me, keeps me balanced.
That's great. And one thing I've noticed from talking with a bunch of friends that do work with clients is they tend to get into a pattern of putting all their clients first and them taking care of themselves second. So, what advice do you have for people who get stuck in that pattern of, oh, the client called, so I needed to take care of that and help them, and I wasn't in the best of space, and but they needed me, so I had to help them, and then it just continues because another one calls and another one calls or emails.
Yeah, I admit that probably about 20 years ago, I did the same thing. And what it does is it creates burnout. It creates burnout, and then you can't help anybody and you can't help yourself. So you need boundaries. You need to have firm boundaries. Then you can have the problem where your friend is a client, or your client turns into a friend or tries to turn into a friend, and you're trying to keep the line there to not cross that boundary. And people will throw the friend card at you, well, you're my friend, so you should help me, and I need your help right now. And you have to have firm boundaries that make it so that you can take care of yourself first, and you don't let people step on you, you know, saying that they need you right now. Sometimes I've helped people out when they need me right now, and sometimes I haven't. And sometimes I've had to say with people that kept using me that way, calling me in the middle of the night, texting me in the middle of the night, calling me at 6 in the morning when they know I'm doing my routine to keep myself balanced and stuff, and they need me right now. It's an extra fee. It's an extra fee. You want me to stop taking care of myself right now, and you want me to help you. I have to add on an extra fee for an emergency fee. And if it's a real emergency, they'll I've had them pay it, you know. Then I've had some that it obviously wasn't a real emergency, and they waited until they had an appointment time in my regular times. So
No, that's brilliant. And another question I have for you is, as we keep talking about magic, I know there's two magics. There's the MIGIK magic and the MAGIC magic. And a lot of people get confused about the differences. And to me, I view magic with the K is dealing with the nature and the energies, where magic with the C is the illusion magic like you see on TV and stuff. What is your opinion on the differences of magic?
well, for one, I agree with what you said. That is the way I look at it too. But in the occult community, some people still call it magic with a C, and some people call it magic with a CK. And the way they say that is that people that are doing ceremonial magic, I think this started with Crowley, okay, and the Golden Dawn. I believe that he was the first one to call magic with a CK, right? Magic with a CK. And so some people use it and some people don't. I use it, but yeah, I would think that magic with the C is more towards the illusionist, the magic that you see in Las Vegas, or, yeah,
Like the pick a card, any card.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So along those lines, and I know this has nothing to do with spiritualism and all that, but like mentalism, I've often wondered, is mentalism really just an illusion that's being portrayed on people, or is it really a psychic gift that's just not been properly identified or you trained properly, that they're using it that way, but it really is something like that?
Mentalism is something that I think it was the 19th century or the early 20th century when people started talking about mentalism. And this also came around the period of spiritualism, where they did the tapping and all this other stuff. Um, I've never really been into that. I've really never went in that direction. Um, but I think mentalism is a lot like energy. We can't see it, we can't touch it, but it's there. So,
Okay.
they just don't have the scientific proof for things yet. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't real. Some people have experienced these things and they feel very real. So, I think that as time goes on and our technology gets more advanced, that some of the things that we can't see will be proven. I believe that.
Very cool. And so we're approaching the hour and a half mark, and I'm just curious because we mentioned where people can find you as in the description earlier when we started. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered that you want to cover and you want to leave the audience with?
I think we covered quite a bit. I mean, I have a lot of skills that we didn't touch on, but if anybody's interested in what I can offer, I would still suggest to go to my website, and everything I do is listed there. So yeah, I'm a person that likes to help people, and everything that I use, every skill that I know, I have used on myself first, before I have offered it as a service. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for modeling the adage of physician heal thyself, as I think a lot of people don't, is they forget that. And so thank you for modeling taking care of yourself and putting yourself on equal or first status.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, and I appreciate you coming on. And before I let you go, there is, talking about gratitude and everything. I know, we just met, and first talked in face to face right before going live. So thank you for trusting me and coming on to my show. And
Absolutely.
from the heart of me and my show to you, thank you for your service to humanity and all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having this platform that features people like me, because it's getting out to the world that, right now, there's so much going on in the world that is, and in the United States, that is very difficult. And a lot of people are having really harsh emotional things happen, and a lot of struggles. And for you to be having this platform where people can, you know, be out there to help others, it's a big thing. It's a very good thing that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. And I always like to leave people with a message of hope. And I'm just curious, with your background and everything, is there like anything you feel like hopeful that you want to leave with the audience in a general as a whole?
I think that humans as a humanity would be better if they just focused on themselves and working on becoming the best versions of themselves rather than looking outside of themselves and complaining about what everybody else is doing or judging what everybody else is doing. If they just focused on themselves and their own life and their own personal beliefs and their own things that make them who they are, the whole world would be better. I really believe that the whole world would be better.
I agree. And to me, that there's a fine line on that path of not being selfish, but being in service. And so that is one thing to watch as you're doing that because, yeah, it is important to take care of yourself and to do your work and to do everything, but not, and I don't know if you'll agree or not, but not at the expense of putting yourself as a higher place than everybody else. And
I
so,
agree. I agree. I totally agree. I've learned my skills and I've earned my skills, but I'm just a human just like everyone else, and I'm still working on me. And I'll be working on me till the day I die, because that's something that I want for myself, you know. Um, I want to bring the best me to the table, to any relationship. And if we all recognize that we learn through relationships, we'd be a little bit more appreciative and kind to the people that we have in our life, you know.
yes, I agree. And so, with that, again, I say thank you. And hopefully, in the future, we'll have you back on as a
I'd
guest.
love that. I'd love
And
that.
thank you. And thank you to everyone in the chat room and for all
Thank
the
you.
questions.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
with that, I am going to say good night to everyone and make it a blessed night, day, evening, wherever you are in the world. And
Thank you, Michael.
thank you. And with that, we are going to say good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Good night.